Greetings to all students and other viewers. Welcome back once again to this channel called Learn Biology with Janet. Today we'll be studying a Form 4 biology topic from Chapter 10, the KSSM syllabus, and this chapter is entitled Transport in Humans and Animals. However, this topic is also suitable for Form 5 students as part of their revision. The Form 5 students who are studying the KBSM syllabus, the old syllabus. And for the Form 5 students, this topic is found in Chapter 1 of the Form 5 syllabus, and is subtopic 1.1 and 1.2. Under importance of having a transport system in multicellular organisms and the concept of the circulatory system for Form 5 students. Okay, so Form 4 students can study as a normal lesson, and for Form 5 students it can be used as revision. So for Form 4 syllabus, the KSSM syllabus, this topic is from the subtopic called 10.1, types of circulatory systems. So it is part 1. There are 2 videos on this, and this one is part 1. Okay, there'll be a part 2 coming up very soon. So let's get started. For this subtopic 10.1, entitled Types of Circulatory Systems, the learning outcomes are as follows. After this lesson, we should be able to, number 1, justify the necessity of transport systems in complex multicellular organisms. And this means that we have to explain why transport systems are necessary or needed in complex multicellular organisms. Secondly, we have to be able to identify substances that are transported by the transport system. And these are substances required by a cell, as well as the waste products of a cell. Thirdly, we should be able to conceptualize types of circulatory systems in complex multicellular organisms. We should be able to explain what is meant by an open circulatory system and also what is meant by a closed circulatory system. Lastly, we should be able to compare and contrast circulatory systems in complex multicellular organisms. And these organisms are insects, fish, amphibians, and humans. Now, the last learning outcome here will be discussed in video number 2. Whereas number 1 until number 3 will be discussed. These concepts will be discussed in this video. Right, the first part is to discuss the necessity for transport systems in complex multicellular organisms that are large. So the first learning outcome is you must be able to identify substances that are transported by the transport system in organisms. What are the substances required by cells and the waste products of cells? All right. So here's our answer. Cells in living organisms require certain essential substances such as oxygen and nutrients. So these are the substances required by cells from the external environment for cellular activities such as respiration. And secondly, what are the waste products of a cell? So cells carry out cellular activities that produce toxic waste products such as carbon dioxide and nitrogenous wastes, for example urea, that must be expelled or excreted. Now let us compare amoeba and large multicellular organisms, right? Why does amoeba species not require a specialized transport system to transport substances in and out of the cell compared to large multicellular organisms that need a specialized transport system to transport substances in the body. So this question is quite important for exam and can be asked as a structured or essay questions. So there are 3 points here that we need to note. First, we must mention that amoeba species is a small unicellular organism, and because it has a small mass or size, therefore it has a large total surface area to volume ratio, or the TSA per V ratio, right? The total surface area means the surface area of the surface, which is its plasma membrane, the surface of the plasma membrane. So the plasma membrane has a large total surface area, relatively large total surface area, compared to the volume of amoeba, which is the volume of the cell. And thus, diffusion of substances like oxygen through the plasma membrane, the surface of the cell, will be fast enough to supply the cell, to adequately supply the cell with all the substances that it needs, such as oxygen or nutrients, as well as to expel the waste products from the cell so that it does not accumulate in the cell. Now, we will try to explain the significance or meaning of this large TSA per V ratio for amoeba, right, in the next part. Referring to the question on amoeba, which we have just discussed, let us try and prove that for amoeba species, which has a very small size, its total surface area per volume ratio is large. So we can prove that through some calculations. And we can also prove that as the size of an organism increases, the TSA per V ratio, or total surface area per volume ratio, will decrease, right? And this will cause the diffusion rate of substances across the body surface to become too low, or the diffusion is too slow through the body surface, such as diffusion of oxygen, to adequately supply all the substances or all the oxygen that is needed by the cells that have increased in number when the size of the organism increases. Okay, let's try and prove the relationship between the size of the organism and the total surface area per volume ratio. So we take 3 cubes of different sizes to represent 3 organisms of different sizes. The first cube has the dimensions 1 cm by 1 cm by 1 cm, the smallest cube. The second cube has dimensions 2 cm by 2 cm by 2 cm, and the third cube has dimensions 3 cm by 3 cm by 3 cm. Let us calculate their TSA per V ratios. First, we draw a table and we write down the titles: length of cube in cm, total surface area in cm squared, volume with the unit cm cube, the TSA per V value unit is per cm. Okay, that means cm squared divided by cm cube, you get per cm. Now, the length of the cube, we can use an unknown value such as x, and then we can find the general formula for the total surface area, volume, and TSA per V. So the total surface area will be the surface area of one face, which is x times x, and then multiplied by 6 faces. A cube has 6 faces, 1, 2, 3, and 3 more faces cannot be seen. So total surface area will be 6x squared. Volume is length cube, so it's x cube, and TSA per V is equals to 6x squared divided by x cube. After simplifying, we get 6 per x. This is the general formula for TSA per V. So if the length of our cube is 1, total surface area will be 6 times 1 equals to 6. Volume will be 1 cube equals to 1. TSA per V equals to 6 divided by 1. Or we can use this formula, 6 divided by 1, you get 6. So using the formulas, we can find the total surface area for 2 cm, a cube with length 2 cm, and the TSA per V, we can also calculate from here, 6 over 2 equals to 3. For the third cube, where the length is, when the length is 3 cm, TSA per V is 6 divided by 3, you get 2. So here you can see that as the size of the cube increases, the TSA per V ratio or value decreases, right? And the smallest cube has the largest TSA per V. So amoeba, as a very tiny organism, has a large TSA per V ratio, right? And the importance of the TSA per V ratio will be discussed in the next part. Now let us try to understand the meaning of the term large total surface area per volume ratio, or TSA per V ratio, in amoeba species, and what the significance is. Now, amoeba species actually has a small total surface area, very small total surface area, as it is a small organism. An elephant has a large total surface area of its skin, but we are not talking about the total surface area. We are discussing the total surface area per volume ratio, per volume, and this TSA per volume, or total surface area per volume ratio, means that we are comparing the total surface area to the volume, in relation to the volume. Okay, so a large total surface area per volume ratio means that the total surface area, for example, in amoeba, is the total surface area of the plasma membrane that is in contact with the environment that contains oxygen. So it means that the total surface area of the plasma membrane is relatively large compared to the volume. Okay, and because it has a relatively large total surface area of plasma membrane compared to its volume, there is faster diffusion, relatively fast diffusion of oxygen into the cell of the amoeba to meet the needs of the cell for oxygen and other essential substances. Then a large TSA per V ratio also means that the V, the volume, is relatively small, okay? Because volume is the denominator here, so to have a large TSA per V ratio, we must have a small v. So it means that the volume of the cell of amoeba species is relatively small compared to its total surface area. And this means that less oxygen, a relatively small volume of cell, means that less oxygen is required by the cell, which has a small volume, for respiration. Okay, so we combine the two together, these two parts. The large total surface area to volume ratio results in this, that the diffusion of substances such as oxygen through the plasma membrane will be fast enough, because of its relatively large total surface area of plasma membrane, to adequately or sufficiently supply the cell with all the substances that it needs, because it has a relatively small volume, so it doesn't need a lot of oxygen. Okay, so diffusion of substances through the plasma membrane will be fast enough to supply the cell with all the substances that it needs, and also to excrete or expel the waste products like carbon dioxide fast enough from its cytoplasm through the plasma membrane, so that these substances like carbon dioxide will not accumulate in the cell. Let us now compare small unicellular organisms like amoeba with larger organisms, large multicellular organisms like insects, snails, and the vertebrates like fishes, birds, amphibians, mammals, and humans. So for small unicellular organisms, They do not need the transport system because they have small body size or mass, and thus their TSA per V ratio is large. Thus, diffusion of substances through the plasma membrane occurs fast enough to adequately or sufficiently supply all the substances to the cell for its needs. And secondly, substance exchange or exchange of substances can occur quickly by diffusion because the cell is in the environment. For example, amoeba in the freshwater environment. Alright, when it's in the freshwater environment, the environment is in contact with the whole cell. Plasma membrane is in contact with the environment, and the oxygen can diffuse very quickly from the environment into the cell. Now, for large multicellular organisms, why do they need a specialized transport system to transport substances in their body? For example, to transport oxygen from the lungs to the cells. So the reason is because they have a large body size, and then because of that, the total surface area to volume ratio is very small. Alright, so now why is it that the total surface area to volume ratio becomes small as the body size increases? We have actually done the calculation with the cube as a model for the organism, as a model of the organism. So one other point I want to point out is that if we consider the organism as a cube, the total surface area increases as the square of the length of the cube. It depends on the square of the length of the cube. But the volume increases as the cube of the length, x cube, okay, where x is the length. Thus, volume will increase faster than total surface area, because x cube is bigger than x squared. And if you are looking at the ratio of TSA per V, if volume increases faster, then the ratio will become smaller as the size of the body increases. So the volume increases faster than the total surface area as the size of the cube or the organism increases. This means that the volume of the body that requires oxygen increases more than the total surface area that is used, the total surface area of the skin, for example, that is used for diffusion of substances through it. Thus, if the organism like elephants were to depend on diffusion of substances through body surface, for example, diffusion of oxygen through the external body surface, the diffusion of the substances will be too slow to supply all the substances that are needed by the cells, okay, which will be very large in number. There will be a lot of cells because the volume of the body is big, alright? So the cells needs will be much greater. So therefore, if the diffusion of substances is too slow to meet the needs of the body, therefore there must be a transport system to transport the essential substances, such as to transport oxygen from the lungs very quickly to all the body cells. Now, if the cells do not get the oxygen in time, they will die. If after a few minutes the cells do not get oxygen, they will die, and then the whole organism, there will be organ damage, and also the organism can die, right? So the second point as to why the large multicellular organisms need a transport system is that the exchange of substances or substance exchange cannot occur quickly by diffusion through the body surface for these organisms, because some cells, the internal cells, are too far away from the environment. For example, the cells of the heart, the cardiac muscle cells, or the liver cells. They are very far deep inside the body, far away from the external surface. So diffusion of the oxygen or other substances through the body will be too slow to let these cells get the oxygen in time, right? Thus, they need the specialized transport system. to transport oxygen, for example, to the body cells, and also to transport nutrients to the body cells. So here is a learning outcome which can also come out as a question in the essay section or structured question. So let's try and answer it. Now we've already discussed this in the previous slide when we talked about the elephant just now. So I'll just read through this very quickly, and you can take note of the points given here. Now, justify the necessity of having specialized transport systems for large, complex, multicellular organisms. 8 marks, right? So the answer is like that. Large multicellular organisms face two problems in obtaining essential substances from the environment. Firstly, their body size is big. Thus, their total surface area per volume ratio is small. And this means that the volume, the V, the volume of the body that requires oxygen increases more as the x cube than its total surface area, which increases as the x squared, the length squared, used for diffusion of substances. Now, this point in brackets, you do not need to write down in your answer. I just put it here so that you can understand it more, can understand the explanation more. So no need to write the explanation in these brackets. Thus, the diffusion rate of substances through the body surface, such as the skin, will be too low. The rate will be too low to meet the increased needs of the cells, of the numerous cells, for oxygen and other substances. Secondly, the distance between the external environment and the internal cells in the body is too far. It's many layers of cells, too far away, for direct exchange of substances between the environment and the internal cells. Right, to continue with the answer, thus complex multicellular organisms obtain or get their essential substances for their cells by having an internal transport system of tubes and vessels, such as the blood circulatory system in the vertebrates, and this enables oxygen and nutrients to be carried efficiently to the cells. For example, for oxygen to be transported from the lungs to the cells quickly, and for waste products to also be quickly excreted by using the blood circulatory system. Secondly, to obtain essential substances like oxygen, for example, as we have studied in the previous chapters on respiration, the multicellular organisms have specialized respiratory structures inside their bodies, which have a large total surface area for the efficient exchange of gases, such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, with the external environment. Okay, so inside the lungs, we have a lot of alveoli that increases the total surface area so that there is faster, quicker exchange of gases between the environment, the air that is inhaled, and the blood in the blood capillaries. Let us now discuss the types of circulatory systems in multicellular organisms. Now, there are two main types of circulatory systems in the multicellular organisms. These are A, the open circulatory system in the invertebrates, and B, the closed circulatory system in the vertebrates. So the open circulatory system is found in the invertebrates, which are the animals without the backbone. These include the insects, snails, and prawns. Whereas the closed circulatory system is found in the vertebrates, which have the backbones. Okay, these include the fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, including humans, and birds. So what is the open circulatory system? This system is found in the invertebrates, such as the arthropods. Arthropods are organisms with the segmented body parts, segmented body, segmented legs, for example. These include the insects and the prawns and crabs. Apart from that, the open circulatory system is also found in mollusks, those animals that have the shell and the soft bodies, all right, like snails. So in the open circulatory system, there is a fluid which we call the hemolymph. It is a blood-like nutritious fluid, all right, something like blood, but it does not transport oxygen. It transports nutrients. That's why it's called a nutritious fluid. It transports nutrients to the cells. So this fluid is not always enclosed in the vessels, all right, in tubes, but it will flow out from the open-ended tubes into a body cavity called the hemocoel, where it bathes the cells directly. It will touch the cells and bathe the cells for exchange of substances. So nutrients and hormones from the hemolymph will then diffuse into the cells, whereas waste products from the cells will diffuse out into the hemolymph. So there is exchange of substances, okay? And then after that, the hemolymph will flow back into the heart, okay? So the hemolymph is sometimes in the vessels, but it will not stay in the vessels all the time. It will flow up from the open-ended vessels into the hemocoel, where it bathes the cells, right? Now notice that the hemolymph does not transport oxygen to the cells directly, because the transport of oxygen, for example in insects, is by using the tracheal system, the system of tubes, called the tracheal system, and the oxygen is transported by the trachea and then into the tracheole and directly into the cells. It does not involve the fluid called the hemolymph, unlike humans who have the blood circulatory system to transport oxygen. Let us find out what an open circulatory system is. This is found in insects and other invertebrates. So there is a heart, and for insects the heart is like a long tube that is segmented. And in the heart there is the blood-like nutritious fluid called the hemolymph. This is the circulatory fluid that circulates in the system. Hemolymph is a blood-like circulatory fluid that contains nutrients for the cells. So when the heart contracts, it will pump the hemolymph into the hemolymph vessels, and then the hemolymph will flow out through these open-ended hemolymph vessels. That means there are holes in these vessels which allow the hemolymph to flow into the body cavity known as the hemocoel. So this word is pronounced hemocoel, not hemocoel. Now, in the body cavity, the fluid will bathe the cells. The hemolymph will bathe the cells, and there will be exchange of substances. Nutrients will diffuse from the hemolymph into the cells, and waste products will diffuse out from the cells into the hemolymph. Next, the hemolymph will flow back to the heart through the hemolymph vessels. And for insects, they have special openings called ostia, which allow the hemolymph to flow back directly into the heart. The ostia is found in the wall of the heart. Now we'll discuss that later when we study the system in the insects, the circulatory system in the insects. So how about a closed circulatory system? A closed circulatory system, which is found in the vertebrates such as fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, is a system where the blood is always contained and flows in closed blood vessels, which are continuous. So closed blood vessels means that these vessels are not open-ended, do not have large holes where the whole blood will flow out, not like the hemolymph vessels. So the blood is distributed to the whole body. Now, how does the exchange of substances occur? So the exchange or transfer of substances like oxygen and nutrients that are essential to cells occurs across or through the walls of blood capillaries to the cells. So imagine the blood capillary, a blood capillary. Now, through a process called ultrafiltration, components of the blood will be filtered out, will flow out from the blood capillaries through the wall, through the tiny pores in the walls of the blood capillaries, okay, into the spaces between the cells, and they will form the interstitial fluid. So from there, the oxygen and nutrients will diffuse from the interstitial fluid into the cells. The whole blood never comes out from the blood capillaries, only components of it, right? Now, the advantage is that the blood pressure is higher and the blood flow to the cells will be faster than in an open system, and thus oxygen and nutrients will be transported faster to the cells compared to an open circulatory system which has low blood pressure. So there are two types of closed circulatory systems. The first is the single closed circulatory system found in fish, and the second is the double closed circulatory system found in other vertebrates such as amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. So we'll be studying the closed circulatory system, the single and the double closed circulatory system, in the next video. This picture shows you the closed circulatory system. Here we see there's a heart. The heart pumps the blood into the aorta. Blood flows within the closed blood vessels all the time, and the blood vessels may branch out to form the blood capillaries. See, and then certain components of the blood will be filtered out into the intercellular spaces, and then the oxygen from there will diffuse into the cells. So the whole blood never comes out from the blood vessels. And then after that, the blood will flow back to the heart via the veins. So in the closed circulatory system, there are no open-ended vessels which allow the blood to flow out and bathe the body cells. Let us look at the differences between the open and closed circulatory systems. So this can come up as a question in the structured section or essay section. Alright. Now you can use a table to show the differences. Firstly, the open circulatory system is found in the invertebrates such as insects and mollusks. Mollusks is a group of animals including the snail, which have soft body, and hard shell. Now, the closed circulatory system is found in the vertebrates, which are the fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. Look at this acronym, which is a very good acronym for the 5 classes of vertebrates. F for fish, A for amphibians, R for reptiles, M for mammals, and B for birds. Okay, so do use this acronym to remember the 5 classes of vertebrates. A very good acronym. Now, number 2, in the open circulatory system, the circulatory fluid is the hemolymph, whereas in the closed circulatory system, the fluid is the blood. So the hemolymph is a blood-like nutritious fluid that is not always contained or enclosed in the vessels, the hemolymph vessels, but it will flow out from the vessels into the hemocoel. For the closed circulatory system, the blood is always contained in the closed blood vessels that are continuous. That means there is no open-ended blood vessel. Number 3, the hemolymph will flow out directly from the open-ended vessels into the body cavity called the hemocoel, where it bathes the cells and where exchange of substances occur. But for the closed circulatory system, the blood does not flow out of the blood vessels directly to bathe the cells. The whole blood is always in the closed vessels. So exchange of substances such as oxygen or nutrients occurs when these substances will pass through the walls of the blood capillary. It occurs across or through the blood capillary walls, and from there it will go into the interstitial fluid, and the substances will then diffuse into the cells. Right? The whole blood never comes out from the blood vessels. only components of it can come out. So we are going to look at the types of circulatory systems in organisms in more detail in the next video. Okay, so we'll be discussing the open circulatory system in insects and discuss it more thoroughly. Then we'll look at the closed circulatory systems found in the vertebrates. For example, the closed circulatory system can be divided into the single circulatory system found in fishes, and the double circulatory system is found in the other vertebrates. So the double circulatory system can be divided into the double incomplete circulatory system found in amphibians and reptiles, and the double complete circulatory system found in mammals and birds. So in the next video, we will discuss all this more thoroughly. And I will give you some very good acronyms to remember some of the facts here. So that's all for this video. Do share, subscribe, and like. And also comment on this. Thank you for watching this video. And goodbye for now.